You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. This week, I'm excited to welcome three-time Olympic gold medalist Tessa Virtue back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. With 5 Olympic medals, Tessa and her ice dance partner, Scott Moyer, are the most decorated figure skaters in Olympic history. So who better than Tessa to get us into the Olympic spirit as the 2022 Winter Games kick off in Beijing? If you've been listening to the show for a while, you may remember my first conversation with Tessa back in November of 2020. At the time, Tessa had recently retired from competition after skating in 3 Olympics: Vancouver in 2010, Sochi in 2014, and PyeongChang in 2018. Back then, we explored her iconic career and some secrets behind her record-setting success. Tessa and I caught up again a couple weeks ago. This time, we dove deeper and talked about her emotions heading into the first Winter Olympics since retiring from competition, and we explored what her months, weeks, and days leading up to the Olympics used to look like. We also talked about her past experiences at the Olympic Games, and Tessa gave me a behind-the-scenes look at how she stayed confident, focused, and energized as she prepared for some of her career's biggest moments. Tessa shared so many ideas, concepts, and actionable tips that will help all of us be at our very best for life's next big moment. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to 3-time Olympic gold medalist Tessa Virtue. Tessa, you hold the high honor of being the first repeat guest in the history of this show. So welcome back. It's great to have you. Our last conversation has been one of the most popular, most downloaded episodes of this show in the show's entire history, almost 90 episodes. So I am honored to have you back in the hot seat here. Welcome to the show.
Oh, well, it's a high honor indeed. Thanks for thinking of me. And I'm a big fan of the podcast and of yours. So anytime you text or call, I'm here.
All right, Tessa, where I want to begin, we're a few weeks from the first Winter Olympics since your retirement from competition. What do you think will be going through your mind as you watch those ice dancers take the ice in a competition that you were in previous Olympics?
It's a strange thing to anticipate because I've known it was coming for quite some time. And yet, even leading into the 2006 Olympics, when we were alternates and sort of planning on attending and gearing up for that was quite some time ago. So 2006, 2010, 14, 18, and now 2022. So it's been so many years of preparing from the mindset of an athlete. And now, I just have such admiration, especially given the circumstances and the conditions right now of all of the moving parts that go into this year's Olympic prep. It's going to feel strange. Honestly, it will. And I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel. Nationals happened recently, and that kind of struck a chord that unexpectedly sort of, sparked this feeling of like, I feel like I'm not where I am supposed to be. And yet I feel so at peace and complete with our career. So I realize I'm talking in circles, and I think that's just because it's easy to run the gamut of emotions with something like the Olympics. Everything is heightened. And even as an outsider now, there just comes perspective. And I'm excited to watch. I can't wait to tune in and, cheer on the competitors. But there'll be something in me when I'm 75 watching the Olympics and feeling weird not being there.
It's interesting. I recall when we spoke the last time, you had a lot of that clarity that you just described, and that you were comfortable with the retirement from competition. You were comfortable with what you're doing now and plan to do in the future. But it's interesting that raw emotion came back a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a visceral feeling. I don't want to have done any of the preparation required to be there. I'm not in that mindset of training and, pushing the limits and just being in that grind right now, at least athletically. But would I love to be on the big stage performing and competing? Sure. That's just not how it works. So it's neat to have time to reflect back too on the very distinct sort of 3 Olympic Games that we got to experience, and each with very different feelings and emotions attached to them, with the naivete of 2010, sort of jaded sense, and notions around the sport that we had in 2014, and then just pure joy in 2018. Now it is nice with a bit of that pressure released. We're not carrying that burden.
So you talked about some of the obvious rigor that goes into training and the years, months, weeks, days leading up to the Olympics. And this year it is going to be different, in terms of, the situation that, the Olympians all find themselves in and having to navigate the COVID piece, alongside all of the other responsibilities. But from your memory, what do the weeks leading up to the Olympics look like? What are you thinking about? What are you going through? What are you doing?
So I'm mentoring a team, an ice dance team right now that is heading into their very first Olympics. And we had a call with their entire support team a couple of days ago. And I said, your only job now is to get on the plane feeling rested. That's your biggest advantage. Don't go there tired, because you have the long trip and then the, rush of excitement, the navigating of getting your outfit and finding your, the residence and all the different moving parts. It is so draining. And it's what you've been dreaming about. So it's been built up and put on this pedestal, and you finally get to live it. Like, there's so much to process that I think right now in the weeks leading in, it's just about maintenance, fine tuning, trusting that, all of the work you've done to get to this point will carry you through. And I also advise them to anticipate some meltdowns. I remember the very last training session we did before flying to PyeongChang. I went on for about an hour and a half on this crazy spiral, thinking we needed to re-choreograph something. And I was just completely panicking and freaking out. And in the end said, no, we'll just leave it as it was. And then after I looked at Scott, I looked at my coach and I said, did you know what I was just experiencing? And they said, yeah, we knew you just needed to go through it. We knew you'd come back around. And, as mentioned, everything is just, the highs are so high, the lows are so low. So it's really about harnessing that, trying to be as present as possible, but also managing your energy and being really effective and efficient with your time.
One of the things that I'm curious about, you kind of alluded to it there, Tessa, is when do you stop tweaking the routine? You clearly had a moment where you wanted to make some changes pretty late in the experience. When typically do you cut off tweaks to the routine and really focus on what you're describing there?
I think every ice dance team is a little different. We, as our career carried forward and progressed, we were more and more comfortable with last minute changes. So even at the Olympics, we competed the team event, and about a week later skated our individual performances. We made a fairly significant change to one of our elements and the exit of it between those two events. But there was such longevity and trust between us and a feeling of unison that I think we could get away with that. But it's different. It's different for everyone.
So musical choice. So this is a story that I want to dig into. My understanding is that, obviously the world fell in love with the performance to the Moulin Rouge music. When music choice, when does that happen? And my understanding is that you and Scott, made that decision. You were pretty passionate, I think, about that music choice. And we talked last time you were on this show about the team around you, but you guys went to the team essentially and said, this is the choice. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think most seasons that happens around April, May, as you finish the World Championships typically in March, and then you're starting to kind of put together what the next vision for the year looks like. Although, if you're smart, you're planning for a quad. So you know what your Olympic moment's going to be, and you work backwards to show the judges over time your different skill sets and the way that you can express yourself to different kinds of themes and styles. And with Moulin Rouge, I think part of what people attach themselves to is just the music is so good. There is so much depth. There's a storyline that most people can recognize quite easily, and it fills the arena. The layers of the musical intricacies are just so easy to get in your bones, so expressing that came so naturally. And while our coaches weren't totally bought into the idea, it didn't take them long to figure out that we just loved it so much. And that connection was probably most important.
One of the interesting things, and I think this applies to sport, business, so many things, is that, it's better to be like really bought into a bad idea than kind of half bought into a great idea. And sometimes that energy and momentum, and maybe you and Scott were feeling that, this gumption and this conviction that this is the right music choice for us, propelled you and created some momentum.
So true. And we had learned that lesson, a couple times in our career, to be honest, but even at the 2014 Sochi Games, our free dance was fine, but I don't think we ever had that moment with the music or even the choreography where we just thought like, oh my gosh, this is the program, we have to skate. And Moulin Rouge was, so the antithesis of that, in that every fiber of our beings came to life when that program took shape. And it was just as much our story as anything, which was so cool. Like we made it our own, and we kind of tried to put our spin on it. And I think that's probably what kept us going through the season, of just continuing to fine tune and refine what was there.
You talked earlier, Tessa, about managing energy and coming in well rested, in a good place physically and mentally. So what does that look like once you land at the Olympics and you're there? How do you do that?
Well, the strange thing about the Olympics is, as mentioned, there is so much stimulation. It's like Disneyland or World, whichever one is crazier. Like it's constant, and there's so much excitement with other athletes and other sports, and it's huge to navigate, and everything takes so much more time. But yet most athletes going will be used to a regular training day of, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 hours of work. So for us, we were on the ice and we were in the gym and getting treatment and seeing our mental prep coach. And when you get to the Olympics, you have such limited access to the arena, the playing field, the bobsled track, whatever. So we would have 1 30-minute practice a day, or maybe 2 if you were lucky. And then so much time, so much dead time to think. And it's a scary place to be. And it's something that you can't simulate necessarily. So what we tried to do, we worked with mentors that really helped us kind of reconcile the Olympic excitement and the Olympic buzz, because you can't go into it thinking it's just any other competition, even though the ice is the exact same. But what we needed to do was be really strategic about our time. So, really using workouts or meal times or, hangouts together as a team to feel like there was structure, to feel like there was purpose, and to feel like we weren't just mindlessly meandering, because you can do that at the Olympics, and things can just take you in so many different directions. You need to be really purposeful and clear.
With you and PyeongChang, you had the distinct honor of being the flag bearer in the opening ceremonies. I would imagine that creates another responsibility. Maybe there's another rehearsal, another set of instructions to understand, and an additional spotlight. What was that like?
Yeah, it was, we said yes as soon as they asked us to be the flag bearers, and we bawled our eyes out, and it was like maybe the coolest moment of my life. And then we took that back to our team and made this grand announcement thinking, and like our off-ice team, our mental prep, our nutritionist, everyone, we made this big announcement thinking that everyone was going to be equally excited. And I would say over half of our team members thought we should have said no. And there's the curse, there's you just have to be on your feet for 8 hours. And there's just a lot of physical and emotional demand that very well could have impacted our performances. So we really needed to come to terms with that, what that meant. And in order to prepare, we simulated everything. So we had the COC send us the flagpole and flag and the boots that we would need to wear so that we could practice that in our everyday lives. We planned what snacks we would have in our coat pockets and when we would eat them. We decided on doing just the one lap and then out. We didn't sit and actually get to enjoy the opening ceremony. So, there were concessions made in order to be able to live and really embrace that moment. But because it was our decision and our choice, we just planned for it. And we knew, 2 days later, we have to be on for the team event. And whatever that meant in our rehearsals, we were prepared to do.
It's so interesting, right? People watch on TV from all over the world and they think there's just a bunch of athletes walking around a track. And here, to get into the routine and do the prep, you made sure you practiced in those boots with that flagpole. You had your snacks prepared. It's something that I think people take for granted, but like a little thing that makes a big difference.
It's huge. I remember it took over a week for our legs to recover after walking in the Vancouver Olympics. We were skating on like cement blocks, it felt like, because it's 8 to 10 hours of just standing and waiting, and the lactic acid's just building up, and you have this weird boxed lunch, and it's all worth it. Of course it's worth it. But at that point, at the start of the Olympics, you're thinking about your performance. Your mind is where your job is. And so even as I'm advising, these teams heading in, I want them to really make the most of their Olympic experience. But when they walk away from it, what they'll remember are really the moments on the ice, like what they've been training for. And so, there are a lot of different, various facets to consider.
It's interesting. I've talked to a few NFL players and they talk about the Super Bowl. It's their moment. That's the pinnacle of their career, but they call it essentially like a circus. Like you said, with Disney World and Disneyland, it is an absolute circus. And, one of the Super Bowl champions that I talked to, he said, what's interesting is they're in a different hotel for the first week. And then a couple days before the game, they move as a team into a different hotel because they're going to now distance themselves from family, friends who have made the trip with them, from as much of the media as they can. And they're going to try and create as much of a normal football weekend experience. Now, it sounds like you're doing something very, very similar, trying to kind of get back to the basics.
Yes. And I think, for us, things like in Vancouver, I had a different phone number for the Olympics and 6 people had my number. And there was this rule with family that no one would reach out to me. I would initiate conversations. And, there's the block that you have to put up with the media. And you have to, in some way, really insulate yourselves, especially with something I would imagine like the Super Bowl or certainly like the Olympics when, you open up Twitter and it's just an onslaught of, what people could be saying or how people are perceiving things from the outside. And I think better to just sort of, for us, to just be really conscious of where we were focusing our energy and how we were spending our time.
So you create that bubble around you. You mentioned earlier about second guessing maybe some elements of the routine late in the process.
Yeah.
Did you have a moment in PyeongChang where you second guessed your ability?
Oh, constantly. Yeah, I think that was in PyeongChang, I felt so prepared. I felt so ready and I knew we could do it. And that was just a testament to our team and the way that we rehearsed and spent those 2 years in the lead up. But it's only natural when you get to, the world's biggest stage that your mind just can sometimes get away from you and question things, wonder, doubt. I think that's really natural. What we did have to our advantage was all that work with our mental prep coach. And he was there with us, spending a lot of time, every day kind of talking through those things. So we actually learned to anticipate those moments of doubt. And we had tools and tactics and strategies to find our resilience and learn to be comfortable and thrive within that and in spite of that.
What's something little that you can do to try and fend off, doubt as it's creeping in?
One of the biggest things for me, I've learned now that I'm an external, or I'm an extroverted thinker. If I could vocalize that to our coach or to Scott and get it out of my head, then it broke the loop. It broke the cycle. And if I could hear myself say some of the mantras that we had developed or some of the phrases to sort of quiet the noise in my brain, then that was a really useful tactic.
And what about, you mentioned the mental prep coach being there with you. I mean, is everybody with you? Is the whole team that worked with you on ice and off ice?
No. And so there are very few coaches that are accredited. Our mental prep coach happened to be working with a few other athletes, winter athletes. So he was kind of dividing his time. But again, something we had prepared for, we knew the on ice coaches that would be there with us. And at every competition in the lead up, we practiced, okay, what do I need you to say? This feels good. What are the routines that we need to go through? before even taking the ice together. How does that little dance work? And we practiced that. So there were no surprises of what coach would be speaking to us before we skated away from the boards. I mean, there were just no surprises.
For somebody who's never been to an Olympics, who's never competed in the Olympics, what is like one thing that you think that people would find most surprising about the Olympic experience?
I think, well, first of all, it's just as cool as people think it would be. There's no it may be cooler. I think the best part is just the merging, like the multi-sport sort of environment. And I remember just walking to the cafeteria and for us looking for anyone wearing a Canada jacket, you're free to just sit down and spark conversation. And I think despite the differences in our sports, the common themes and threads amongst athletes were just so powerful. So it was really neat to sit with a curler or a luge athlete and feel like, oh, wow, they really know what I'm feeling. And you know what else is surprising? Especially at a Winter Olympics, a lot of teams have bikes. And so you just like bike around the village. You go to the cafeteria, you go maybe to your venue. And that struck me in Vancouver, especially.
That surprises me too. I never would have imagined seeing a bunch of Olympic athletes riding around on bikes around the Olympic Village. So Tessa, we're all going to be, excited watching the Olympics. And part of me is going to be wishing that you and Scott were out there and competing for another gold. But, I'm also just so excited for you and the clarity that you have found and the enjoyment that you've found in this next chapter. And that's where I want to go next. The last time we talked about your, the beginning of your executive MBA. That's kind of coming to somewhat of a conclusion. What are some of the skills, now that you've had a chance to kind of really dig into that executive MBA, you've had a chance to do some, work unrelated to skating professionally. What are some of the skills from skating that you're bringing to your, new career in business?
I think, at the risk of using a corporate buzzword, just like a growth mindset, that obsession and desire to improve, to just constantly want to learn and, adapt, be iterative in approach, I think has really served me well as I start to step into new roles. Feedback is another interesting one. I have to say that was probably the hardest part. My schooling experience was mostly team-based. And that was a huge learning curve in realizing the difference. What I think is direct feedback versus what other people do is so different, just because I spent my whole life every 2 minutes getting some kind of constructive criticism and actually craving that. And so trying to find that balance of like how much of that I need, how much of that I expect, what I can give, I think, but that is also, the ability to have open dialogue and collaborate with a team and with a group has been, really fulfilling to sort of pick up where I left off with Scott and leverage some of those tools and skills that we worked on together.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but like in your skating career, like you said, every 2 minutes, somebody is tweaking and repositioning and making suggestions and, providing constructive, criticism of every little thing. And you have to be receptive to that, incorporate those adjustments. Everybody's not used to that.
Well, most people now, I'm learning it's like an annual performance review. And I'm just like moment to moment, okay, tell me how I can be better and what you need from me. But I think the other thing is, in sport, you can learn a skill, but you also have the freedom and the time to practice it. And in life, so often new things are thrown at you and you're just expected to execute. And so I think, that like middle part, and that's more of a mindset of like, I'm going to give myself the freedom to practice this and fail fast and, figure it out on the go, maybe in a scrappy kind of way, instead of like putting that expectation or pressure on ourselves to just deliver immediately. That takes time, but it's something that I've certainly needed to hold on to.
We talked about that the last time. We talked about this difference between, when you're training for the Olympics, you have a singular focus. You told me that every smoothie that you eat and every decision that you make is through the lens of, will this help me become an Olympic champion? And in the business world or outside of that bubble of training for the Olympics, there's so many things, like you said, coming at you. How do you do that? Like, how do you kind of switch now, off of the singular focus into the multi-dimensional aspects of your life and your new career?
I mean, in a very basic way, in my day-to-day life, I just try and be structured with my time. So really emphasize deep focus work and try to minimize distractions when I can, and be, again, purposeful on chunks of time and how I'm, spending my energy. But there's been a learning curve for sure, where I had people around me before kind of protecting me from all of those distractions. And now it's like the floodgates are open and you want to be accessible and you want to be available to your teammates or to work or whatever. I'm still sort of figuring that out. And yet I think maybe I'm approaching it from a more holistic standpoint and trying to find, exactly that magic meeting point of performance, but also well-being, and not sacrificing that or putting that at risk so much.
I think that's a really hot topic in sport, in business, and in life in general, is that balance. I want to go back to a point you made earlier. One of the things that I've been trying to do is really lean into this concept of like offense and defense. So there are things, throughout the day that are defense, right? There's just things that come at me that I'm going to have to deal with. I don't know maybe what they are when I wake up, but I know that I'm going to be fending things off. And then I know that there's a few things each day, or maybe at least a few things each week, that are offense, things that I have to push forward to move my own or my team's strategic or this podcast strategic objectives forward. And what I've been doing is carving out time where I say, I want to make sure that there's 6, 7, 8 times a week, maybe for 30 minutes, where I'm turning off notifications on my phone, closing my inbox, I'm doing things like that, and I'm focusing only on offense. What are your thoughts on that? Do you subscribe to an approach like that?
I love that. I think that's really interesting. And I think it gives a bit of a visual too, like a way to really clearly identify and differentiate, some of your tasks, but it also gives you a sense of ownership and control. And when people are empowered and feel like, there's a measure of control that is really up to them, I think they're much more likely to thrive, but also to kind of create the right environment within which for them to flourish, within which to flourish. So I think that's really interesting. I think, I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna let that percolate, and I might apply it into the way I operate.
One of the things, Tessa, I remember us talking about in the past is the way, you had told me that, ice dance is a very archaic sport, and it's got a lot of archaic processes and methodologies. And you and Scott were pretty disruptive in terms of how your off ice and on ice team communicated, and the way you do things, and the way you challenge the status quo. Are you able to take some of that gumption and disruption that you brought, to the skating world, and maybe bring that to the business community a bit? Do you see opportunities for that?
I think so. I've been working on this a little bit, as I find my role within Deloitte, where I'm working now. And I think part of my job is not to learn how to be a consultant in the typical fashion, but actually to be a catalyst for a different way of thinking, or to bring, the non-consultant sort of perspective and lens on things. And I think I thought that, I never really felt like I belonged in skating, truly. I always anticipated finding that place next where I might feel like I'm really part of it and I'm on the inside. And I'm realizing more and more that I just might not. It might be just part of my personality that I'm on the outside looking in a lot of ways. But I'm learning to be okay with that. And I think that is sort of refreshing and a little bit vulnerable, but also that's just, maybe there's an advantage to that too.
I think that might be. I mean, that's such an interesting thought there, and something, to continue thinking about, feeling like an outsider and what that enables you to do. I mean, maybe it enables you to bring fresh ideas. Maybe it enables you to bring fresh perspectives. Maybe it enables you to not get kind of caught up in the way things always had been done and shift things to the way they can be done.
Yeah. And I think learning to trust that is critical, like most things.
Tessa, where I want to wrap up. I mean, I never want to stop asking you questions, Tessa. I could go on all day, but these are interesting times that we're in, and we're all dealing with so much adversity, so much change, so many different things, whether it's created by the pandemic or other, limitations that we have. Staying positive amidst adversity and things that you can't necessarily control. What do you recommend people do to stay positive, shift their perspective?
Well, I think my first thought on that is like, I'm not sure that we should put the pressure on ourselves to always be positive. I think we can reframe situations and manage, the way that things are perceived and maybe put a spin on it and learn from it. But it's like, we're not going to be happy and joyful and productive and all of the things all of the time. And so actually maybe attaching less meaning to our feelings and emotions, and that I know that I can still produce good work when I'm down or sad or upset or sleep deprived. And I've just found a way to, I'm not saying I have, but I'm trying to tell myself, like, I've found a way to sort of deal with that and combat those emotions. And then when I feel great, that's so much better. I'm able to appreciate it and embrace it in a different way. And so for one, I think maybe just not trying to, I think happiness might be a byproduct of a lot of other steps that you can take to be fulfilled and feeling content. That's one thing. But what I've really tried to do, and this is, I think you know me well enough to know that this is a bit of a challenge. I'm trying to just do small, little manageable things throughout the day that make me feel better. Like make me feel like instead of a complete overhaul of my nutrition, for example, I can do a few little things that are a little bit healthier and I feel better. Same with working out, or I would say, like, for me, the focus has been on kind of well-being. And as someone who didn't think it was worthwhile to go to the gym unless it was a 3-hour intense workout, for me to kind of have 20-minute spurts here and there and take the pressure off in general, and just like, what are those marginal gains that we can do that actually cumulatively add up and make us feel more whole and more complete?
That's such an important idea, Tessa, and something that I know I need to work on myself. I'm similar in the sense that I say, often if I can't work out for an hour, I'm not going to do anything. But what, that 10 minutes, that 15 minutes, that little bit of cardio, that little bit of stretching, 10-minute yoga video, it makes a big difference. But it also gets you going in the right direction and creates that positive momentum.
For sure. Yeah. I'm definitely like that with emails too. Like, if I have 100, unless I'm sitting down and responding to all 100, I think there's no point. But so now I'm trying to tackle a little bit at a time.
We'll have to do a whole other episode on inbox management, because I have not figured that out yet. So maybe we can figure that out together. Tessa, like I said, part of me wishes I'd be watching you in a couple of weeks, go after another gold medal or two. But I am so happy at the clarity and the enjoyment that you have in your career right now. And it's so fantastic to see. And I just, congratulate you on all the success and all these different dimensions of your life. And we're going to have to do a part 3 on Everybody Pulls the Tarp. And I'm not going to wait until the next Winter Olympics. That's for sure.
I hope not. Well, it's always a pleasure and a privilege to chat. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Tessa. We'll talk soon. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my monthly email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.